Guru Ratna Mandala Thamiyatayami Sanje Chodan Soji Chonon Lo Jaji Udani Jasoji Dagi Chijinji Zono Drola Benji Sanje Druwa Jo Sanje Chodan Soji Chonon Lo Jaji Badoda Je Dagi Chijinji Zononji Drola Benji Sanje Dru Jo Sanje Chodan Soji Chonon Lo Jaji Badoda Ne Jasoji Dagi Jive Sonanje Drola Benji San Ba Jo La Dana Me Medam Jian Boda Jajan Lo Jojo Lo Shava Shabana Sanje Sun Para de Shin de Jeda Chi Tempe Chin Din Diri Chi de Jajan de Ye Chi de Java Tenje Shabata La Cholo de Jungo Dia La Benya Jaja Sun San Medam Beta Ne Le Bato La Tuve Sonya Shin Namo La Ye Ka Dan Dan Ne Janga Hunda Dan Me Ganam Dan Rova Kunje Tana Chi Sa Ba Tham Jakke Ro Da Go Che Dan Kange Dona Den Jun Da Mi La Do Tin Je Ba Sun Sa Sun Ba Me Ba Ye Sanje de La Cha Cha Lo Oh Ya Da Kwasere Jangula Zhanga Chimbi Kwa Chuxin Ningbo Me Ba La Da Du Da Ge Yin Ni Jun Jun Ne Zewen Zhewe Dong'an Ma Se Ne Sem Ni Changju Chao Rang Nge Jie Jin Men Shen Jubi Men Shen Jubi Dongba Le Shen Na Chi Ru Duwa Xu La Jia Ba Shao Chen Ni Da Song Wa Na Xin Chen Ni Kwa Chuxin Ningbo Me Ba La Da Du Da Ge Yin Ni Jun Ju Ji Se De Ta Ka San Ka Yin Nga Ran Zo Rab Che Tangbo Ge Ani Da Mi Da Ba Dang Ani Dang Zing Ge Nyebo Mi Da Ba Dang Da Rab Chi Yin Wa Sun Ba Ge Na Ge Te Ge Ani Zang Yu Nyebo Mi Zang Ba Dang Dong A Ji Nyebo De Wa Ani Da Ge Nyebo Dang Mi Me Xe Ni Ani Rab Che Tangbo Ge Ani Ka So Dang Zing Ge Nyebo Mi Da Ba Xe De Ani Shi Ba La De Na Mi Da Ba De La Mi Da Ba Ra Ba Dang 아니 미다바 참니 샤메나네 미다바 라바 셰베가나 아니 지된데 이런도 메덴바 아니 치와 제바 치와 마테니 오 아니 다지 들이 가서래 치위 제수 아니 메도 미루바 아니 레가나게 지수장을 장데 아니 겨와 령거바
Yeah. So there's as it says in a verse by Rinpoche, Jetsongkaba, that this samsara is essenceless. It has no essence to it, like a water, like a plantain tree. Plantain trees, like a bananas, kind of. They have no heart or core to them, and this is essenceless. It has no essence or heart of it, and thus, but striving to find some kind of essence within that, some core within it. Ordinary sentient beings are dragged into the ocean of samsara and dragged into all kinds of suffering as a result of that. And then the verse continues to recognizing the meaninglessness of this kind of fruitless striving for samsaric pleasure. We should exert ourselves in all ways to accomplish pure ethical conduct, to develop and to especially to maintain the vows of that we've taken up. And so this pertains back to the topics that we've covered thus far in the first 4 chapters, where in the first chapter it explains how it is that things worldly beings can misconceive things which are actually impermanent as being permanent, and by grasping or misapprehending them as being permanent, they cling to them, and then they get involved in all kinds of negative actions. But you can also produce positive actions under this misconception. But in any case, especially through the force of negative actions, ordinary beings are dragged down into lower states of existence. So the first chapter then has explained in some detail how it is that the misconception that we are going to live for a long time is based on the misunderstanding or not being aware of and not properly thinking about the gross form of impermanence, which is death. At the end of this life, all life ends in death, and that coarse form of impermanence is a fact, but because of our failure to recognize it as such and to be mindful of it, then we get involved in all kinds of negative actions, which at the end, when death finally comes, those negative actions then will draw us down into lower states of existence. So at the beginning, we need to be mindful and recall constantly the coarse form of impermanence, which is death. And then on top of that, in a subtler level of understanding impermanence and not grasping at things which are impermanent as if they're permanent, is then to go into realizing that they change moment to moment. They don't endure. Nothing that's produced by causes and conditions endures for a second moment. That subtler form of impermanence is introduced too. And then the next chapters go into other aspects of how to negate the misconceptions that we have about things being pleasurable, which are actually of the nature of suffering, and pure, which are actually impure.
Oh yeah, then is that 시비 제수 아니 가서 몇도 면조와 끼와 량거와 끼와 대양 아니 랑라라와 매봐 아니 약간나 그 제수란에 끼와 량거와 아니 된지 리된 좀 터봐라양 아니 개와돼 아니 원디 주니 수준 내셔매 산이 아니 따와 잡에 소환나 신체니 된지 리된 잠보와 질량발라양 아니 원디 주개와 사고에 니나네 장 아니 다른 사람도 토비 아니 땡상부 된지 아니 토와 제발라니 아니 팀지 텐저 저 팀명 뭐보다 미공자본테 다왔다도 이 제니 아니 들라지고 또 디비나가 소환나시 체니 아니 수준 넘버 다 왔다 당한 데봐 아니 지속을 조쳐왔다 텐데 고거래.
So thus it's explained that at death, it's inevitable that we'll be, when we come to the end of this life and death occurs, that we'll inevitably be reborn into another state of existence. There's no getting around that. That occurs without, we don't have any, at the moment, control over that fact of being reborn. And when we're reborn, this is going to occur under the control of the actions that we've created, the karma which we've produced. Either virtuous, meritorious karma will give rise to some pleasure, some desirable, happy form of existence in the next life, or if we've been predominated by negative actions, bad karma, then we'll endure suffering in the lower realms of existence. That's just an inevitable fact that will occur at the end of this life when the gross form of impermanence, death, occurs. And so thus it's said that if anybody who wants happiness for themselves at a very basic level needs to engage in ethical conduct. Ethical conduct is the only way that we can preserve ourselves from falling into the lower states of existence due to violating ethical conduct by creating negative karma. So therefore, just as a basis, we need to be sure that we create positive actions in the present life so as to ensure that we'll be reborn into the next life in a good state of existence. But that, and this is explained likewise in a verse from Master Dharmakirti, which explains all of this also in some detail, or it has it embedded within it. So this fact, though, however, is just a basic level. Like if you just want good rebirth, then of course you have to practice ethical conduct. But if you want to obtain the kind of life that you've gotten this life, where you've achieved the opportunity to begin to practice the Mahayana path and make progress towards complete awakening of Buddhahood, then in addition to simple basic ethical conduct, one needs to begin to practice the virtues of the Bodhisattva, which are engaging in generosity and all of the other aspects, the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva.
Oh yeah. 아니 다 조준 남바 다바 생각에 간지질했을 거라서나 아니 고스물라 텐신 남라 때나 텐신 텐바다 시신 남라 때네 아니 캐라비 조준 다 중사자 마가 왔다 가서 중산 가와 있나요? 아니 가서래 누가 샤도 말을 봐 가도 카도라 치지 아니 가서래 얘도 샤도 미줘 봤는데 지라 아니 주를 남았은 게 다봐서 된지를 쓴 거래.
So what is pure ethical conduct? Pure shila or tsultrim in Tibetan, which is it also involves disciplining oneself through observing vows and pledges of ethical conduct. Pure ethical conduct entails mindfulness. We have to be constantly mindful of our behavior and engage in introspection as well. Watch our minds to see what sort of direction they're heading. And so maintaining or guarding one's ethical conduct in a pure fashion entails preserving that state of mindfulness and introspection so as to see what one is doing at all times and to guard oneself from engaging in even the slightest form of misconduct. But then at times when one might go astray and lose one's mindfulness and so forth and stray into some misbehavior, and when that happens, then on occasion that will happen for beginners, and then you have to immediately recognize what happened and then employ the appropriate method to purify oneself of the violation of your ethical conduct that you engaged in through the practice of confession and purification in that way.
수준 캐len게 안에 캐레 만보 상가지 수준 캐레와 찬주세비 수준 안에 소소타비 수준 캐라와 캐렌시라 안에 냐레 매바 그러와 안에 캐만하자 송돔니 아니 송에 수준 송에 있잖아 안에 니들이 차네야 안에 넘버 타바시 따와네 매바 그러와 넘버 타바 디샤네 안에 넘버 타바 송아야스가 매바 안에 고수는 개와 최고 제장 안에 가서를 가 정어지수 마상바 안에 개와 나와 다와 제자와네 매와
So then, however, we people, we've taken on this huge burden of vows and ethical discipline, vows that require one to observe ethical discipline, and we take them on vows very sort of easily. But as far as actually preserving them and guarding them, we don't do such a good job of that. We take the vows sort of lightly. And then when we've got them, we don't always observe them very carefully. So in that way, we don't protect or guard that which these vows that we've taken on.
안에 또 채와 태셔와 라면자 안에 자유 방전 나신 배 사여바 인자 안에 조사 나서네 안에 다 마대와 저거 예 조심바리
조사 So it's sort of like when we do it that way, we're careless about our ethical conduct. We take the vows easily, but then after we've taken them, we just don't pay much attention to being mindful of what they entail and the necessity to guard them very carefully. And then so carelessly, out of distraction to all kinds of interesting worldly things, we involve ourselves in all kinds of worldly activities and create, as a result of violation of the ethical vows, a huge mass of non-virtuous, non-meritorious karma. And it's sort of like we're building up all of the sort of accumulating the prerequisites for achieving evil state of existence in the next life.
안에 동아지라시네 마대와 인상 신의 안으로 매지 등매지 대지적 공조심동에 담지 대지점도 신도 때마다 대라자냐 밤매바차 태양 간나랜데 레삼나 랑도 수신주라라 레소초 라라소 센찬이다 가소래 라린디딩 가서 소나신신에 아니 신의 깨는 가서 그 주저마도 마주바 인자 계산 안 돌아 맞대 만들어 때나 안에 차장 고제 그동안 봐도 몇 바지 아니 영거와 타쳐와 인장 아니 내선 그동안라 주신 장네 안에 텔레 주변에 라마 꾸져서라 잡수주 숨을 잠잠잠로당 대지 저 꾸졌음도 내에서 꾸져서라 잡수주비 아니 내라 꾸졌으면 내숨 아니 잡수주 주당 가서로 산에 최단 군디제 타바데 반남지 그랑 집아 탐자라 쳐와 시행 집에라 쳐에 탈락해 봐 그냥 투지 신부 이름에 봐 줘봐 팬다 마다지 텐주 봐 세베 잡수 예외 군전 텐서당 아니 대가라 아니 고아당아 송그 동안에 지신장에 텔레비전에 봐 아니 라마 꾸졌습니다 예봐 이 시위관에 아니 잡수 주에 잡수 전주주 봐 시와찬이 대지 저 꾸졌으면 숨동에 아니 꾸졌으나 잡수 주신 아니 잡수 들어와서 마셔 아니 꾸졌으면 잡수 주에 점주 나잖아라 아니出신도 나고야다 점주 납작게 나나야 아니 저어데 가르해서나 아니 렌데지로 레레라 또래치야지 말이 인자 랭해와당 레페셔와당 레마샤와당 마자바당 샤와 시미사바라서 렌데지 안도라 다出신도 아니 라와데 아니 점주 납작체 오 텐드라위 아니 단다 라제 탐보기 아니 미자바테 셴니 아니 주 충우당 통공을 나라라 주제 다 되듯이 말이
So thus, what we need to do once we recognize this situation that we've gotten ourselves into is begin to do something to address it. And the primary means of doing that is by going for refuge at the beginning. One needs to understand the condition that one is in, that if, for example, if you've taken a lot of vows and you've carelessly violated them during the course of your life, you've amassed a huge mass of negative karma, non-meritorious action that will entail rebirth into an evil state of existence in the next life. And once one has fallen into an evil state of existence in the next life, one of the three lower realms, then there's nothing but suffering to experience there. There's no, if once you fall into that state of existence, there's no, you won't hear about refuge or good karma or anything like that. It's just nothing but misery for virtually interminable periods of time. So once one understands that and recognizes it about oneself, then one has to develop fear of that fate that one has sort of created for oneself by violating one's vows and amassing a huge mass of negative karma. And that fear then serves as a foundation, fear of falling into the lower realms of existence, serves as a foundation for developing a pure sense of refuge by recognizing that the only thing that can protect one from the fate which one has created for oneself is going for refuge to the three jewels. Within the going for refuge, the principal practice that we have to do when we have gone for refuge is in fact observing our karma, avoiding negative actions and performing positive actions. That's the primary instruction or thing to be trained in when we go for refuge. And then in order to develop a pure form of refuge, we need to understand all of the good qualities of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. With respect to the Buddha, we need to understand how the Buddha is a perfect teacher, teaches all various forms of instruction appropriate to the different stages of development of the different disciples. Does so in a completely impartial way, motivated solely by compassion and love, never by any kind of stinginess or self-interest, and all of the other good qualities of the Buddha that are expressed in the stages of the path kind of instruction and elsewhere throughout the scriptures. And then on top, then we understand the Dharma is the method by which we can preserve ourselves from falling into the lower realms of existence. On top of that, the Sangha is the associate that can help us to practice, develop our refuge and understanding of Dharma. And so in that way, then one can, through developing a pure kind of refuge, then one thinks more and more about the condition that one finds oneself in, and especially observes one's actions, the karma that one is creating, either positive or negative. And in doing that, then we put into practice the instructions that are found in the first chapter of the Chatushataka here, the 400 verses of Aryadeva, where he teaches us how we should get rid of the misconception that misapprehends ourselves as if we're not going to die, that erroneous idea that death is not going to come for a long time. In order to do that, we need to meditate very, very carefully on the inevitability of death. We're definitely going to die. We don't know when we're going to die. That's totally uncertain to us. And then when we die, nothing but dharma will be of the slightest use to us. Those topics then are things which are expressed in this text in a way, in the 400 verses, in a way that is common to the way it's presented to the person of smaller scope, a person who is solely focused upon achieving good rebirth in the next life.
Oh yeah. 단지네 가소래 운 된저 계제기 안에 주로 나왔다 봐서 와라 때네 된저 류전 토바듯이 이나야 안에 코 사전 예len지 풍부대 练 시제라 안에 돼 동아지라 실래 대위 고바까지 잡매 봐. 딱 가서 저 주와 나신 전에 류전 간데 돈도 사담이 류전 간데지 토바듯이 연장 동아지라 실래 대위 고바까지 잡매 봐. 동아 실제와라 대왕은 봐자 마도 안에 동아지라 대와 고가 잡매 봐. 강도내자 동아지라신 강라롱자자 동아 수당抓到 동아지 안에 라신라 마대바 인상 다 가서래 동아 실제와라 대화 명명자 아니 거의 핀소 탐제 강제 동아 실제와라 대화랑 맞아 라신지 대화 매바 인상 코와 치신 인보 매발라 다도 다그 인이 존시시 텐다위 아니 거의 핀소랑 야와 정확히 코랑 야와 집에 내중 아니 내중께 다 호텔이라 코아시스면 인보면발라 다도 다그 인이 존시시 랑 코와래 거의 핀소랑 야와 집에 내중께 봐대 아니 군전도 태대 아니 현 섬전 현지 등도 파 삼도 잡아 아니 인제제대 되게这个主要东岸马顺呢，俺那什县县，俺东岸进闹了没随便人家建呢，俺那什县东岸进闹是民间提，人家提给长的，俺那提到东岸就当接完了，找我对吧？我对吧给拉上，提到东岸就当接完了，找我切完了，然了，谈到牛把没把人上，牛把这收了原呢。俺那军公司的原来滚到这个，俺那不让他们作为长久住，上节困难了也把的线呢，俺那去的小吧，什么他们就跟着拖家，咱那不让他们作为上节就恐怕他们就什么接的了。这个这个东岸马说呢，什么长久去了，我错的谁干了？俺那长久是没把长久什么节，没把长久可是他就别什么节吧，咱们就民主吧，俺那叫吧庆祝了老爷老国王印章。다 된다 되게 저때 당보대 라지 당보送给 안에 장대 다다도 준비 왕게 레사 레디 왕게 안된데 두 된딜라나 나 동아지라 신래 님보 매바토 저 코와라 나와 지wen게 준게 다 드니 라생아와네 손제 아니 다 디가소를 신 섬전시 다디 마 가소를 저원 이제 신부권한데 안에 자주 그 섬제주지 마세 是吧？俺那老姐结巴呢，兄弟，俺那家人不养大把作为上街去恐怕多把了，俺那些人打我单了爸爸的做我都相关人把的，要结束。俺那看的是，考起新宁波没把了，大多大给专业中就去谁干了，等到的。 네, 다들 나들 나장 가서래. 당시 말이 몇구나 랑데. 아니 장대 다다시 왕게 레사데. 레사데 레지 왕거대로 아니 삼미 공방지 토바 이나양 동아지 라실라 더 중세자 매봐 동아 칠지어 와라 대런 거 봐마도 아니 동아지 대원 거 봐마도 가서래 동아 매봐 동아지와 대양 아니 강도 내장 동아 수당 조장 동아 강라 롱제장 아니 동아지 라실라 마대봐.
So now then, once we've developed that sort of attitude that's common to a person of smaller scope, that is the aspiration to achieve a good rebirth, and as a result of that, observing our karma very carefully, going for refuge on that level by thinking, well, if I don't observe my karma carefully, and be cautious with the actions that I'm engaged in, I'll be reborn into a lower state of existence, that basic level of refuge. Then on top of that, we need to think further how it is that as long as we've taken up these aggregates which are contaminated because they're created by contaminated karma and mental affliction, it doesn't matter where we're born, even if we're born into the most high status life with all kinds of pleasure, the most wonderful forms of wealth and happiness that can be found in the world, all of those forms of existence from the very bottom of samsara to the very top are actually completely pervaded with suffering. When you're in a high state of existence and you think, oh, this is really nice, I've got all of the wealth and power and pleasure that I want, actually that's really just due to a misconception in which you're grasping at something which is really of the nature of suffering as if it was happiness. That's explained in the chapter where it showed how when we misapprehend that which is of the nature of suffering as if it were real, actual happiness, it's completely erroneous, because these contaminated pleasure is itself pervaded with this basic suffering nature of being created by contaminated karma and mental affliction, and therefore it's not real happiness, but is actually is in fact really suffering. Ordinary worldly beings don't recognize it as such. So no matter who you're associating with, whatever kind of friends you have, whatever kind of wealth you possess, as long as one is in a condition where one's life has been produced by one is in a state of the 5 aggregates which are created by contaminated karma and mental affliction, then that entire samsara is pervaded with suffering. It's either gross suffering or suffering of transformation, or the just basic pervasive nature of being created by karma and mental affliction. All of those states are suffering. So once we come to understand that, the way it's been explained in the 2nd and 3rd chapters, and we come and 4th chapter as well, that it's not suitable to apprehend ourselves as subjects of great pride and haughtiness because of the reality that of life actually exists of. Once we come to understand that properly, then we can begin to give rise to an attitude of revulsion towards the entire samsaric condition. By recognizing things correctly as they're explained in the first 4 chapters here, we can come to see that even when we're going through relatively conventionally pleasurable states of existence, we're trapped in this situation which is entirely pervaded with suffering. Then we'll no longer have the same degree of attachment to the nominally pleasurable experiences that we're having, and instead come to have a sort of deep-seated sense of disgust and revulsion, and that can be developed eventually to a complete disgust and revulsion towards the entirety of samsara. Once you've developed that, that itself is the actual renunciation, when one recognizes that the contaminated aggregates, no matter what kind of condition they're in, are pervaded associated with suffering. That is actual renunciation. When you have that, then you've developed the attitude of the person of intermediate scope, or the attitude which is common to a person of intermediate scope. But it's not adequate to be satisfied with that. One needs to recognize that just as oneself is trapped in this condition of samsaric suffering, that all other sentient beings who have been your mothers numberless times are in the same exact situation of confusion, misapprehending things as permanent, as pure, as pleasurable, as being a self, when in fact they don't possess any of those attributes at all. So other sentient beings are in the same situation, suffering horribly as a result of it. And once we come to realize that, then we can develop great compassion. And with great compassion, then we can use that as a foundation for developing the superior aspiration. Superior aspiration is the wish to free all other sentient beings from samsara. Based upon that superior intention or superior aspiration, we then can develop the aspirational form of bodhicitta, which is the wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, to liberate them from samsara. And then once we've developed that, then we can develop the active form of bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, which actively takes up the responsibility to do that, and thus engages in the practice of the 6 perfections. So the first 4 chapters of the text serve as a basis for developing the attitude of the person common to the person of lesser and intermediate scope. And then the 5th chapter introduces the practices of the bodhisattva based upon those understandings. And then the rest of the 6th and 7th chapters continue talking about these bodhisattva practices as well in different ways. And then the 8th chapter forward starts to introduce how it is that all of the first 8 chapters are dealing with things on a conventional or phenomenal level, and then the latter 8 chapters of the text deal with how it is that we understand the ultimate nature of things by investigating the ultimate status of things.
Oh yeah, that didn't say so. That didn't matter. The only thing you should not say is that, and just tambo shi dani tije la, and tanda kaso, chanju ke sem jeba. Tango so, uzo chanju ke sem jeba de shulan mando. Tandi kadu de lang was tem mere. So aku uzo chanju sem je. And uzo chanju ke sem je ne tije la, and tije la tuan tabe chanju ke sem jeba. Tu song go are. 因上他有点在告诉他去学那些以前的哦，真的啊，作为这个成为动画什么想就叫了，本身就比单把的群众多些了，叫把小这个群众跟那个，俺那些了去把路去比叫把听到什么就得俺来下个啥的，没有都是这样是吧
？So then now in the text itself, it's not explicitly stated that this is the way it is laid out, but it's clearly implicit within the text. That is, the first 8 chapters present the method by which we generate what is called phenomenal bodhicitta. Phenomenal bodhicitta referring then to the aspiration to achieve unexcelled perfect awakening for the sake of all sentient beings, which encompasses both the aspirational form of bodhicitta and the active forms of bodhicitta. And then the latter 8 chapters explain how it is one produces ultimate bodhicitta being the wisdom which understands reality or understands emptiness as it actually is. These are not stated explicitly in the text, but it's clearly implicit in the structure and in the content of the text.
Oh yeah, that didn't. Cause that told you, just as you job a lot to Shabatella, do some gain, say, Tambo Chanju the same gate. Same gate was on your mother, and a job at Chindula Lomdegi, and you by Chanju the same gate. Or some gate was on your mother, and I'm by Anda to the Sanjaji, command table Chindo, and just as you job at Chindula Lomdegi, and you by Chanju the same gate. Oh, some gain, and a job a lot to Shabatella. That and that the Topji do, shower down by the Tambo, 아니 토지 저위 채와 담바달라 산제지 대비 채와당 뒤 대우 저 주시 로마 된도 저 소미 예배나네 산제지 대비 채바데 가서 칭찬인 거죠 왜 산제는 요원이 시대 칭찬하체 와 나 되게 대부 니원 대부 딩바데 대부데 어디 대부데라 지den군라 치다자 지바제 치달 지바제 줘봐 군전 대신 군전 자되네 치달라야 지바제 치달라야 지바제 수치치 다다가 그래서 나 되게 가르쳐서는 지den군라 치다자 치달 지바제 줘봐 세고 산제라 녀와 담바나미 산제라 녀와네 부담바디 아니 치위 지발라 치위 지발라 투비 지바 탐자라 타와 치다기 지바기最위 지바 탐자라 타와 주고레스 디단 지덴바 균라 치다기 자 치다 지바께와 티신도 서로 지덴 균라 치다자 치다 지바께 주바 세데 디다 지덴바 균라 치다기 자 치다 지바께와 주와 티신도 군전 시wen자티 세럼 대신 군전 자제제 치다라야 지바셰 군전 시wen자디 강기 퇴와라서 시자 말리바 귀천바게 군전 시와게 다티 강기 퇴와래 양알레 대외 까와전도 주베스디 아니 양대 토바게 까와전도 주베 니모데 아니 시지르바 빠미 양알레 대외 까와전도 주베 치다라야 지바께 그래 스티 치다라야 지바께데 치다 좀바 주베 치로 세가라 대신 군전 자데니 치다라야 지바께
So thus in order to develop bodhicitta, first we have to develop the aspirational form of bodhicitta, the simple wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And then once one has developed that, then one has to develop the active form of bodhicitta, where one is actually engaged in the practices of the bodhisattva, the six perfections of generosity and so forth. And so in order to do that, one necessarily has to understand the qualities of the objective that one has. The objective here is to achieve Buddhahood. So in order to wish to achieve that, any kind of objective, we have to know what the objective is. And here Buddhahood is described in terms of the qualities of its activities and various other qualities of the teachings of the Buddha and so forth, which are given in some treated here in this portion of the text. So that leads down to the result of the activities of the Buddha, which begins in verse 102, and it says there that just as ordinary people are terrified by the words Lord of Death, so the words Omniscient One terrify the Lord of Death. The words Lord of Death, or you could just translate that as death too. The word death terrifies ordinary people. Similarly, just hearing the words Omniscient One endow whoever hear them with good fortune to achieve nirvana. Here, Omniscient One refers to a being that understands all objects of knowledge. Omniscience is defined as Omniscient One is a being or person who understands all objects of knowledge. And then the good fortune to achieve nirvana. Nirvana here refers to the extinction of all negative faults and the accomplishment of all good qualities, the exhaustion of both forms of the obscurations that prevent the achievement of liberation and the obscurations that prevent omniscience.
Oh yeah.
Good fortune to achieve nirvana, thereby terrifying and subduing death as well.
Oh yeah. 너희 가서 아니 저 간다기 나이 천 퇴월 주와 대다 탐자장 좀 내지 천 퇴월 주와 대다 탐제 티바스 뭐 가야래 년지 티바다랑 산제 티바다 티진지 티바 가야 용화 시기 용서 양알래 대와 那你其他两代是的，你我帮原住帮别帮把的了两代是过的，是吧？但原住帮别帮把的了两代就，那你两代就两代，让家推荐两代用过我一张，对吧？什么了，对吧？看样容我是个，我说两个人到就我写送把大不我，
So thus, there's a sutra that says, those who hear my name will attain nirvana in one of the three vehicles. Here the three vehicles are the vehicle of the Shravaka, who achieves, the disciple who achieves simple nirvana, and then likewise the Pratyeka Buddha, who achieves, the individual realizer, who achieves that form of nirvana, and then likewise the Bodhisattva, vehicle of the Bodhisattva, who achieves perfect Buddhahood. So nirvana in general refers to the as sort of a general term, it refers to the extinction of the obscurations, which are the mental afflictions, and those obscurations which are mental afflictions prevent the achievement of liberation as such.
Oh yeah. 本来叫我去了普吉瓦堂，这他们家做把他们家单位。
So it's like the following analogy. When a son was born to a certain king, he issued a decree that to free all the prisoners in the jail, and his subjects were happy about that.
他这里什么吃不就是连龙都没点吧，关键没被主角都没用完呢，晒的，他吃不就是晒的，龙没点就打我就是晒的吧的。 是吧？打几天打把打完的，没打把打完，你个打完，你个马一把打完洗钱。打几天他打点把打，他打没点把打，你个打完的，你个马一把打完洗钱。这些小娃谁的？这些小娃了麻将吧，出去打了麻将吧，俺他妈有看啥个下个的，这人家。 俺这出去的，俺这些小娃床盘街的，叫我打完的，没打完打完的，你个打完的，你个马一把打完钱。 俺那里说在这都打瓦当，俺在他在把打瓦真的，他吃完就是的，看啥给打了咱们的吃完印章，俺那中间这个连龙都没个人，话看啥打了咱把给，俺那看人呢要嘛的话没印章，他地天他挺多的。
So now then, next someone might say that the Buddha is not omniscient because he didn't answer 14 questions that were put to him as to whether the self and the world are permanent or impermanent and so forth. There's a set of 14 questions which begin with 4 alternatives with regard to the self and the world, saying it's permanent. Someone asked him, is the self and the world permanent? Is it impermanent? Is it both permanent and impermanent? Is it neither? Are they neither permanent nor impermanent? These sorts of questions, there's a whole range of them, up to and including whether or not the so there's a question also about whether the body and the life force are of a single substance. There's a whole multitude of 14 of these questions which were presented to him, and he declined to respond to those questions because of his understanding that any response that he would have made on that occasion to that particular question to that particular questioner would have caused the questioner to fall into some kind of wrong view.
我等一下，他得了，做了在场没在场，送家明啊哇，在那关键你没写下哇，写了具体也写这个，看你送过来是呢，他打当几天打没打说吃完就是那俺那吃完在地刚才专门的一连马送把一张，那打没准备吃。 他们前把面做专门的，他前把面把酒啊没那么些呐。
So someone might say, surely the Buddha lacked omniscience. He lacked omniscience, since he did not answer these 14 questions, such as whether the self and the world are permanent or impermanent, and so forth. But the verse here replies, the subduer, or I usually translate this as sage. Sage has perception of that which should and should not be done or said. What reason is there to say that the omniscient one is not all-knowing?
哦呀，他得了， 군제 민비 주지도 주와 민바 마세 아니 저와 주시 시와 때라 미세바데 군제 마인비 주지도 주와 민 주지도 주와 민바 마세 군제 인비 주지도 주고아레스 군제지니 군제지 주지도 주데스 군제 가르레스나 투라 제단 제민탕 강게시 투발라 내가다 타두기 제베트다 튜마인바다 제바차와 민바당 메반바당 내바 송자타다 무슨도 시고아레 세가나 투라 제단 제민탕 송자 민아와 대소도와 송자타다 무슨도 소진 송자 민바양 무슨도 시비시방아와 인베 시방아와 인베 달래 미좀바데 가르서 래 미좀바네 아니 래고 자야데 가사가 달라 담네 최단 가사가 달라 담네 최와인베 최단 가사 땅가 정 달라 담네 다바야 마이 미다바 마이 강야 마이 랭게 미리지와 디자 가사다 최지 달라 담네 최와인베 아니 최시 까비치리스 최시 다 나가비치 체제 미루신 다음에 때나 다음에 대해서매 사매 때부터 미루와 인상 아니 래롱 맞은 바래
So thus, the reply to this is that rather than disproving, rather than so when the Lord Buddha did not respond to these 14 questions that were presented to him, this not only is not evidence that he is not omniscient, but in fact, on the contrary, it is evidence that he is omniscient, that the Buddha is omniscient. So the commentary here says that a sage, meaning Lord Buddha, directly perceives the right and wrong time for both temporary and ultimate actions. What actions should not be done, what is not beneficial, what is harmful, as well as all that should or should not be said. So the Buddha, in the verse as it says, the Buddha knows what should and should not be said, the proper occasion, the context of who's asking questions and so forth. Since the Buddha possessed such perception, he did not give an answer to these questions, which were based on a belief in the real, in persons and phenomena as being real, or the true existence is the way it's translated here. It says here, I got lost, sorry. Okay, sorry. The translation here, I'm just missing something. Since the Buddha possessed such perception, he did not give an answer to these questions, which were based on a belief in the true existence or the persons and phenomena as being real. It is not feasible for a basis of attribution whose existence has been negated to have an attribute. What this means here is that here, the people who are asking these questions presupposed that that there's a real self, that there's some kind of essentially existing or absolute or real self. And then they asked whether such a self is eternal or non-eternal, is it both eternal and non-eternal, is it neither eternal or non-eternal? So if the questioner is laboring under the delusion that the self is real, then any kind of response that you can give to them about some attribute of the self, it being eternal, non-eternal, both eternal and non-eternal, or neither eternal nor non-eternal, any kind of response that you could give to that question would simply reinforce their misapprehension that the self is real. And so therefore he didn't answer. He did not answer because he saw that they would not be receptive vessels for the profound, meaning emptiness or ultimate reality, were he to teach selflessness.
Oh yeah, 남을 때는 내도 말하고서는 렌루마템바 테나 군제니 미세 잘라 규지여 세대 테나 내다 내 마인 바타다 무슨도 치비치 최대비 내도 롱하다 내도 마인 바타다 무슨도 세비치 군제 미세 차와라 군제 치에 지안 메라스 Teni kunje yimbi junzen de juare, slam long madam, but kunje yimbi junzen de juare.
So thus, not only is there this fact that he did not reply to these questions, not evidence that that the Buddha was not, the omniscient Buddha is not omniscient. In fact, it substantiates or serves as clear evidence for the omniscience of the Buddha.
Oh yeah. Ki cheche la rinje chungwa ki, uma rinje chungwa ki, jiden tatang dan nam xie na asan. Ani da jimden de la chua, numa dengi chua ka nana tatang dan bada mi den baki. Tatang dan nam xie, xu na jawa mi sung sung, se lian mi sung sung. Kanchi tetar sa yu che, se de, ani sa yu che, ani tongpa yi tenpe ne ru mi runga de la, ne min zhuo la mi sung wa, ti chi na, ani kai nam ji, 军舰他们这写话写是没送吧的，军舰没被主机，就是军舰一被主机的就把咱提送过来。天气起呢，看上去军舰他们这前边写。
So this is explained. This is expressed likewise in the precious garland, which says, "Ask whether it had an end." The conqueror, meaning the Buddha, was silent. He didn't respond because he did not give this profound teaching to worldly beings who are not receptive vessels. The all-knowing one is therefore known as omniscient by the wise.
Oh yeah, that did. 叫我讲些个，叫我讲些长时脚把见七八节对呗，确实，起码全部都把你都通行，在这面呢七八节了些买完当，长时没没，哪古巴新都是哪长时没没哪古巴新都，全把线了俺差了些呗，俺他不俺你七八当差不新了，上节讲他不给我注意团在不一弄，啊。
Kimna jumpet. So the example that's given for this is like following analogy. A certain king wanting to penalize a rich Brahmin told him that he would be punished unless he quickly sent his father's well. The Brahmin's daughter replied, "Wealth attracts wealth. Please send us a well." In this way, they avoided punishment. Similarly, a Buddha acts for the welfare of sentient beings with skillful means.
Oh yeah, that didn't it? The Carzo, the Carina, the Sunja member, Missona, Hajin Lata, the Kodum Janji Poo, Shisan Lai, and Chi Sumba Minam Shena, Sumaji, Denny Shella, never Sumba Mayimba, Develop Sumba. 提这还是马跑吧，马在那找马跑人那把就西北提军战士，那都行吧的是。
So someone might say, well, if the Buddha does not say what should not be said, didn't he say in reference to Devadatta? What of this boy who wears one piece of cloth and has taken the bait? The answer to that is, although he said this, it was not to harm someone else, Devadatta here, but to turn them away from ill deeds. He saw that unless he deflated Devadatta, many transmigrating beings would be harmed.
Oh yeah, that is. That you were chances. Oh, some Jimmy, chances to do. Jabba Yansu Lenzu la. Shabatella sum chayagala, Jabala be Gulong Chaba, Simji be Sonam, and a Jabala Luzum Janet, that's some Janet, that Hambola Jabala be Gulong Chabatella, and it was some Chawa Kang, young Gulong just talk away that is already said, Sungore, was some Janana, you so you turn to Tambatang. Shella Mika was Jew and Chachu Sambala Samba one Gilis to a Tamba each. 他们过什么呢？一做了就啊，电把台了，什么都把多少了，空气说那么拉说吧，马东天气两个了，一年全部都把掐，谁干了？我打这个速度啊，我什么就两个了，是六档、二档，一的，俺那我什么就两个了，他一做。 看说了，过去给每个来了之后，就做滚龙了，来吧，一来两把一张，滚了一年天全部的，做了就把掐的。 저 차디 윤전 관계치나 그런 게 있으면 개미기 왕도 마도와 개미기 왕도 마도와 그런 게 있으면 개와다 미개와 인바 마도박이 누마대지 있으면 좋아하다 와라 아니 소나 마인바 마도가 싫어 와 마도바스 누마대지 있으면 좋아하다 와라 소남다 소남 말서와 마동의 칠 세마도바 조소라 강지 소남 나서와 마동 티실.
So then next comes an explanation of how the cause of that, which is the cause of a Buddhahood, is explained in terms of the practices which are to be taken up, the way in which the bodhisattvas practice the behavior of bodhisattvas. That has multiple subdivisions. The specificity of the motivation in which one trains oneself in the practices, and then the merits of generating bodhicitta, the actual way in which one trains oneself in the practice of the bodhisattva. This first topic has multiple subdivisions as well. The way in which our demonstration that that within the three doors, meaning body, speech, and mind, then the mind is chief in terms of determining the character of the action that one is engaged in, whether it's meritorious or non-meritorious. And then, so this is the first subject that comes about, which is an exposition which shows that within the three doors, the body, speech, and mind, that mind is chief or primary. And this is explained as follows. Mind should be understood as paramount or foremost in all activities of the three doors, the body, speech, and mind. Without intention, verse 104, without intention, actions like going are not seen to have merit, and so forth. In all actions, therefore, the mind should be understood as paramount or chief or principal. You could translate so as that way. This is because actions like coming and going are not seen to be meritorious or non-meritorious except through the power of the virtuous or non-virtuous intention motivating them. So other than neutral forms of actions, neutral actions don't have sort of meritorious or non-meritorious motivation underlying them, but all other actions which are meritorious or non-meritorious have either a virtuous or a non-virtuous intention, which is is the motivation underlying them.
여기 전부 주가 대체 거기 전부 주가 차대 대체 다 뒤에 빼잖아 빼나 집어 와시 사간도 쉬도 구수지라 차차로 현라 오고日本 切白 구수라 차차와데 대화당 So there's
an example here of a naked ascetic who entered a temple and prostrated to one statue while touching the other with his rump, posterior, thereby creating virtue as well as non-virtue or non-karma, sin.
Oh yeah, that's it. That 가서는 자주 선발에 현라 고슴지래 미개와 주와 소쳐봤다고 미개와 주와 아니 자주 선발라 300원 그 아니 가와 주와요 밖에서 주와 담바더라 300 자주 선발라 그야마 연대 미개룸 탐제길에 뉴저지 강지 양대 왕주지 어디다 그래서 거래서나 다중 공화라 고슴지 내꾼라 이 조인 바 티실 와 티시 아니 티시 현라 판배 300현라 판배 300棍拉月300什么王头被抢去300拉是啦300抢去300拉这些技术给我们原的技术给我的原的아니 소져 봐서 현라 미개와 주장 아니 장주 선발라 대탐제 아니 그래서 주와 현배지 선발 장주 있으면 끝나는 와 이장 선발 장주 선발라 대탐제 그래서 주대 강기시나 이 지다 되바신 장주 있으면 끝나 이 지다 되바신 티왕도 여바시 가와 미게와라 미주진 가와라 주비 왕도 주바 토비실 세가 강지 태양 강지 양들 왕주 치를 세오 삼바 장주 그선 육군의 람바 인자
So then the next point is that things which, even things which would be non-virtuous for others to engage in, because of the intention of a bodhisattva, these things can become an excellent source of virtue, excellent virtue. And the verse here is 105, which says, in bodhisattvas, through their intention, all actions, virtuous and non-virtuous, become perfect virtue because they are in control of their minds. So karma, that means here actions which conventionally would be non-virtuous for ordinary people, become virtuous for bodhisattvas. Since mind is foremost in all activities, virtuous actions such as giving or even actions such as killing, which in others would be non-virtuous, all become perfect virtue in bodhisattvas who are in control of their minds because of their motivation to help others. This is because they have gained the ability at will to engage in virtue and not to engage in non-virtue.
Oh yeah, that's it. Bena chanju samba ni ji shambo sheja wa teben du jo shigi. Chanju samba ngaja choba jo saba debi teben gombo shi. Ani mina dundung ge sebe. Gombo shi ge dundung ge seba kawa bomdu ko.
There's an example for this in which is said that there was a bodhisattva who is called Mahakaruna, who was a captain, ship captain, and that bodhisattva used a short spear to slay a pirate captain who had the intention to kill a group of 500 bodhisattvas that were on the ship, on board the ship. He thereby averted, it says turned his back on, but that really means averted 100,000 eons of samsara.
Oh yeah. That didn't you was 70 Sonam like ye say gala, that 70 la, leak of the 10 sem jumbo, 10 times 7 tambo give Sonam song shot. That's Jidan good chanju sem that 10 chanju sem me on good and it Caso good chanju sem give Sonam and the labring gala so one I say channel. Toma good chanju sem give. Sem give about that solemn to song. Then I reach solemn changing. Then I asked any Tomanila maybe Sila Song de Giavana, and a Jalam to pay. And the Tomani Sila Song de Penajalan, Penaya Chade, and the Tomanila maybe Gomjungi. I know Musum Kasana Casa Sana Chit. Remarking the chat that Tarangosum Gasana top day, and it on Musum the Tower Tisana, and it on Musum the Tower Tang, a Palam Tower Tender subject of a Tunya body.
So now then, next comes showing the virtue of generating bodhicitta, of producing bodhicitta, and that has two subdivisions. First, the merit of generating the first generation of ultimate bodhicitta. Now, in the stages of the path exposition, it explains how phenomenal bodhicitta is produced first, the aspiration to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Once one has done that, then one engages in the development of ultimate bodhicitta, the wisdom which understands emptiness directly. And the way it's explained in the stages of the path exposition is that one generates conventional bodhicitta first, phenomenal bodhicitta first, then one enters into the stages of the path of accumulation, preparation, and in the path of preparation, one achieves the point where one develops shamatha, a stable mind of shamatha, and then in addition to that, the insight meditation, bringing those together, conjoining them so that they're functioning cooperatively, and with the insight, that sort of insight meditation, one takes as one's object emptiness, and so there's stages of that as well, developing it first through the medium of a concept, and then eventually the conceptual understanding of emptiness dissipates and gradually disappears, so that finally at the end of that path of preparation, the conceptual understanding of the concept through which one is understanding emptiness, the image of emptiness in a sense, is finally completely dissolves, and then there's a clear perception of emptiness, direct perception of emptiness, and that direct perception of emptiness is the first initial moment of what's called ultimate bodhicitta, the direct perception of emptiness, and that achievement of ultimate bodhicitta is simultaneous with the achievement of the first bodhisattva stage if one's in the Mahayana path.
Oh yeah, 진짜 아니 창심 그 소람 조람이라 창심 소지기 람담 창심 지직된 빌람세 아니 된담 섬지 토바 되네 손데 아니 창심 사주 파지라 창심 파빌라 가서 파벨람다 아니 창심 지직된 때에 람세 두수가리.
So this is explained, in that way it's explained that once one produces phenomenal or conventional bodhicitta, the aspiration to become a Buddha, then one enters into the path of accumulation, and then the path of preparation is just outlined briefly. Those two first paths are called within the bodhisattva path, the worldly path of the bodhisattva. The bodhisattva is still on the worldly, in a state of worldly existence. And then once one achieves the path of seeing, which is that direct perception of emptiness that occurs at the culmination of the path of preparation, and achieves the first bodhisattva stage, then that is the beginning of the initial moment of the transcendental path, or supramundane path of the bodhisattva, which proceeds all the way up to through the 10th stage of the bodhisattva path up to the point of achieving Buddhahood.
Oh yeah, 진짜 군도 장주지 셈제비 판연될라야 아니 준주고 담보라 소와나 신천이 장주 셈제 주나 깨지 코에 쩌라담배 냠다남 냠다지나야 대신남지 세시 저자신 아니 지된 하다 미제바 아니 차체베냐 수주와 그러와天내송대 니로감 밤에 주자 선앙수 유미체바 두마시 난가냐바라도 좋으시 자주지 셈제바天내 송대 아니 다 니로감 영화그 제바 밤에 주장 안에 그 개왕한 거가 그 배웠다 텐데 그 파연 아니 근데 자주 셈제바 파연이 지주로 담보라 소아도 담감 중요하래서.
So now then the benefits of developing phenomenal bodhicitta or conventional bodhicitta, I'm using the term phenomenal usually for Kunzop, Samvrti bodhicitta here, is the merit that arises from that is expressed in the first chapter of the introduction to the Bodhisattva's way of life or conduct. And there it says that there's a verse which says that once one has developed just a single moment of that phenomenal bodhicitta, aspiration to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, then whether one's sleeping or even if one's distracted by mundane sort of endeavors and is not sort of consciously has that bodhicitta sort of manifest within their mind, a person who has given rise to that phenomenal bodhicitta is one for whom, even in those states of distraction, they give rise, they're producing a huge mass of merit. And because of the merit that they're producing, even when they're sleeping in that state, then beings that are tormented in the hells admire them or praise them, and all of the gods and humans within the world consider them objects of praise.
Oh yeah. 나 되네. 대체 나 된담 장주기 셈 세대 아니 간제지라서 그 와래서나 아니 지 되게 오로데 간제래서나 아니 돈이 무슨도 답이 아니 조연 남리 강한 돈이 무슨도 또에 대한 관계 돈이 무슨 또 그래서나 아니 조장기 내로 좋아. 톱자 조장기 아니 내루라 내루 무슨 도바 이나 누바. 좋아. 어텐디지 이나 누바기 다도 순고하래. 이나 누비 안 티징게 조여 지나리. 지당 아니 이나 너니랑 무슨 이나 누바 년들라 요하래. 리라 조 chanju 단담 섬지 때라 사상답에 섬지 심바징 하와 고고하래. 是吧？上次他被审计就马前呢，昨天跟那路了，你那路讲，俺你团的审计就忙着的，是吧？
昨天给那路了。
昨天跟那路，你那路吧？
你那昨天给那路。
昨天跟那路，昨天给这个当你的了玩意儿。昨天跟那路，昨天给当你。
昨天给那路 ，Do you know that term? Jambala. 昨天给那路。
조장 기띵 그 돈이 분비 내루서나 분비 띵 그 돈이 세도아 가사 기내루
조장 기내루
가사 기내루 가르래
가사 기내
가사 그 돈이 가사 기내루 타도 가르잖아 가사 랑시지 마주 버와 가사 기내루 간저서 랑시지 마주 원내요 버와 현재 가사 기내루 타도 돼 가사 랑시지 마주 바데 가사 기내루 타도
昨天是呢？
昨天就呢，军纪里他们家做，军纪里他们家抢啊，原来纪里他们家做我给上街去，上街的是个哇，昨天是，昨天，
好嘞，
帮你点了被洗的做外抢救，做外抢救，
哦。
做抢救，好贵哇！
哎，空嘛用的啊，的空嘛用，
做抢救哎，
做抢救内陆，嘛嘞，做抢救内陆多被，托尼多被，的空嘛用的，
可能是
做抢救内陆多被落，
我的这做抢救内陆多被落的，他团到什么去的嘞？
团到什么去？的空嘛用，空的。
这当做抢救内陆到完了，团到就是一般吃完的话嘛嘞，做抢救内陆人人就把去过的。
啊。 Okay. Oh, so I'm sorry, I just got tangled up something I've never heard before. Here then, what this ultimate bodhicitta then is the direct perception of emptiness, and the direct perception of emptiness, as we said, occurs on the at the culmination of the path of preparation, and. At that moment, then what happens is that the sort of dual appearance here refers to the emptiness appearing via the medium of a concept. The sort of duality, meaning subject-object duality, with emptiness as object and perceiving subject as being two things distinguishable phenomenologically or in the course of that experience. When that dual appearance dissolves, then one has this and disappears, like the sun setting or something like that. Then that disappearance of that dual appearance is called an understanding, and here it's referring to perception, a direct perception of awakening, the state of awakening. This is a technical term that I'd never heard before. It refers to the understanding of the basic condition of awakening, and that's what another name really for ultimate bodhicitta here. So in general, awakening and what's called the Great Awakening are the same. So now there's a technical distinction here between I'm sorry, I'm not getting, I mean, I'm kind of getting it in Tibetan, but putting it into English is another story. There's a distinction that's made here between full awakening and great awakening. Generally, you can say they're synonymous. That is, they refer to a gnosis in which the stains have been extinguished and won't arise again. And so within that cognition, there's here again referring to a cognition of emptiness or the way things actually are, reality of things. There's this state of great awakening or full awakening is synonymous of it, generally speaking. But one can also talk about a distinction within this between like an initial experience of that occurs, for example, at that at the initial part of the path of seeing for a bodhisattva, and then the way it's culminates in sort of a perfected state at the culmination of the bodhisattva path, where a person achieves Buddhahood, and that is called the great awakening.
아니 대한답이 샘 담보집이 선남당 선남는 이와 샘집이 선남는 이 세가라 대한담보 샘 담보집이 선남당 현 샘집도 주비 현 샘집도 주비 선남게 개봐 다 대한담이 샘 담보집아 세대 가와래 해서나 된단서지 통마 토야 돼 아니 단대디 사탐보 톱디다 봐 사탐보 톱하다 된단서지 톱아 안에 뒤냐면 말이 테네송데 테니 토벌 주와이 자주 선바 시제장이 기냐도서 대한담에 자주 선바세 어 사탐부터 받대나 내 이제 디순고 다데 자바로 담보 대한담에 자주 그 셈집이 쏘남니 자주 선바 셈담보 세대 대한담에 자주 선바기 위 셈담보 인자 사딘제고 탐자니 상주선바 셈담보 사딘제고 탐자니 콜리주와 니주와 대다선을 내게 파스 상주선바 니라 간에 손데 된담보 전서바 세체나스 어때도가 사탐보 토바튼 사탐보 토바 내소세 어때네 손데 텐이 토바 주바 사탐보 토바다 된다선 토바 튀냠 통남토 튀냠바 뒤연내지 개반이 대한답에 자주 셈비 자주 셈비 대한답에 셈담보집에 써남니 아니 써남 가시 녀월 사베 아니 리시다보 콜리기에 자우르 집에 써남 치마나양 서딩기 겨우 탐제 테리집에 써남 마와 안에 다시 세대라 서딩기에 탐제니 콜리기와 녀주와 대다 써남 내게 파
So then the next topic is again showing the merit of generating bodhicitta, and it's referring here then as particularly to the generation of the merit that's generated when one initially produces the ultimate bodhicitta, this direct perception of emptiness. So the first topic in verse 106 explains that, where it says, where one would pose the question, when are such bodhisattvas who known as ultimate bodhisattvas? The reply to that is after they have achieved the first stage. I'm translating bhumi or sa as stage. The merit of bodhisattvas with the first intention far exceeds that which would make all beings on earth become universal monarchs. Universal monarchs are, here it's Chakravartin Raja, or universal kings or Chakravartins, kings who control the whole world. The special qualities of their good qualities are as follows. If the accumulated merit through which one becomes a universal monarch ruling the 4 continents is great, there is no need to mention that the merit required for all beings on earth to do so would be greater. the merit of the bodhisattva who has first generated ultimate bodhicitta far exceeds the merit that would make all beings on earth become universal monarchs. Ruth has translated ultimate altruistic intention. I'm translating this ultimate bodhicitta because actually it's not intentional or altruistic. It's a cognition of emptiness. So the far exceeds the merit that would make all beings on earth become universal monarchs. And so this, again, this first generation of ultimate bodhicitta is another way of designating it as the path of seeing of the bodhisattva path.
Oh, yeah. I say, be said, that turned up a change of some tambo and get breaking. Changes be sonum tennis, not say be sonum tennis. Setting it to a tamjani. Kulujo and you do attack a sonum layer and they check about the papa. Then, Jayu Chichane. Ribanaba Jabani, no mount, and Ribanaba Jabani, tea, no mambo you do you go in Basinos. No.
So the example that's given for this is a king issued an edict which made it easy to know what was permitted and not permitted. And this brought the king wealth.
Oh, yeah. That, yeah. Same time, but Java City Canada, and the Bachiba Changes of Jabba Lava Chubicala, and the Tendam Chanju Sema to put the changes on was a Masha Balatena, and it Kachi Kunzabang turned up a Chanju City, Chapa Mashaba, Sosa Jevo Ina, Changes about Tanya Bamimba Debas, Sem Java said to turn out Changes of Jelaconi. Oh, Tanya Bamimba Debani, deeply put it to a Chimmy Tawachin Tawa Chow, so Anashi Jenny. That Sem Jini Chabadi Aboche. Tamboch. Ani, oh, Shandin do Anam Bayanda Bazawa, Anam Bayanda Bazawa, which Chanju Tom Deji, Guja Chanju, Sem Taylor, and it's all making your Tambanai. Sem de la Lord Johnny, Sem Chabaja, Sem Chabati, Zomaking your Tambada. And it took to Chamber Suba, Chansam Jitonam Toba, Chanju Sembara, Tunya in Bari. The need 10 years in Bash in the center, Katashi want to show an Ashi, Jenny. Ani, some Tomani Dana Pavi, not a power in our Karina, Nisha, Tomani, maybe in Bash, and I sat Tambo Tobatina, and it turned to be some Chanju Semba. Or turned up a Chanju Semba, that didn't show Goriza. And the Negazo turned out some Jetajishu and Nashi turned them some Jet Tobana, and it's teaching Papa the deal. In that, with the same jet down, turned up Senji, imagine some Tambokiava said, turned up with some Tambokiava, then, and it's so that you were like Chanju Semba Simon, but then get Antiba put the Chuan, but Chimi Tawachin to a Chagore.
So then next there's someone might say, some people do say actually, or have said, that they fail to differentiate between the attributes of phenomenal and ultimate bodhisattvas. And because of that, they claim that if someone is an ordinary being, they cannot be a real bodhisattva, an actual bodhisattva, meeting the definition of a bodhisattva. Since this is a grave misdeed, negative action, it should be thrown out like a gob of spittle, is what the text says. What this is referring to is that, as we've mentioned previously, that the way the process works is that, or generally, one develops bodhicitta, phenomenal bodhicitta, that is the altruistic intention or the wish to be, a desire to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. That's phenomenal bodhicitta, and then one at that point is a conventional or phenomenal bodhisattva because of having generated that form of bodhicitta within your mind. And then and you do that through the procedure as it's laid out in the stages of the path by developing compassion and so forth, and going and special intention, aspiration to become a Buddha, doing all of those practices. And then once one has done that, then and has developed phenomenal bodhicitta, you start to practice. In one way, you can go and practice generosity and so forth, and collect merit in that way. And then one enters into developing a complete understanding of emptiness, and starts off by, first of all, establishing emptiness correctly through reasoning and analytical investigation. And once one's established it properly, rationally, then one meditates upon it through developing shamatha and insight meditation, and then taking emptiness as an object, one meditates upon it. And then, as we've mentioned previously, that conceptual understanding of emptiness that you initially develop through meditative concentration dissipates, and eventually one gets a perception of emptiness at the culmination of the path of preparation. And that moment of realization of emptiness, perceptual realization of emptiness, is the path of seeing. At that point, one has achieved the first bodhisattva stage and achieves the name of an ultimate bodhisattva, because one has generated ultimate bodhicitta, the cognition of emptiness. Here, ultimate bodhicitta is differentiated from other cognitions of emptiness because it's embraced by the higher aspiration to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So it's a form of bodhicitta. So some people have been confused by, even like this passage here, where it talks about the first generation of bodhicitta. In the context of the text here, this is referring to the first generation of ultimate bodhicitta. And so some people have misconstrued this or other similar passages and have thought that, well, if somebody has only generated phenomenal bodhicitta and has not yet developed ultimate bodhicitta, then they're not real bodhisattvas. That is an extremely grave error. Deprecating someone who's a bodhisattva, of course, is a terribly grave thing to do. And thus, by doing that, one generates a huge, massive bad karma. So that's why the analogy is given is you cast it away like spit.
Oh, 도저히 그냥 가서 심지 되는 사람다 몇당 라삼 타바당. 남바면 바샤도 티시드 바방바고 제 아니 심지들라 산점도 자주 가라 매와주 비심지 군조 장주 심들다. 군조 장주 그 심들라 아니 차수 초람다 저랑 거 주지 심지들라 매와주 비심지. 아니 어디니 사당번에 림비바지 심지들라 아니 라산답이 심지. 아니 사지 다바사중 그 심지들라 아니 남바면 비심지. 아니 산제 그 사이에 심지들라 드바밤이 심지. 군조 심지 코란라야 아니 산점 거나 두시사고 와래.
So there's a way in which the bodhicitta is differentiated in four sort of stages. The first, once one is initially produced, the aspirational form of bodhicitta, where one is simply has the desire to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. That's called a bodhicitta, which is engaged in through aspiration, by admiring bodhicitta and aspiring to become a Buddha. One has that at the very beginning then of the bodhisattva path, or the Mahayana path as such. Then one produces that form of bodhicitta, and then as one is, and then on top of that, then you develop the actual, the definitive form of the aspirational form of bodhicitta, and then the engaged or active forms of form of bodhicitta when one is doing the practices of the bodhisattva. Then eventually one achieves the path of seeing, ultimate bodhicitta, and that's called the so the second one. So that's then called the bodhicitta, which is purified through the higher aspiration, higher intention, or something like that. And so that occurs, that starts then at the path of the first bodhisattva stage, and through the first first 7 stages of the bodhisattva, of the higher stages of the bodhisattva path. Then one achieves the 8th bodhisattva stage, and at that point then one's bodhicitta is called bodhicitta of the maturation, technically. And then for the 8th, 9th, 10th bodhisattva stage, it's given that name. Then finally, the bodhicitta, as it is occurred during, as it exists during the state of Buddhahood, the Sangigisala Kare.
Oh, yeah.
Is called bodhicitta, in which all of the obscurations have been gotten rid of.
Oh, yeah. The Lasantabi Semji Topti Zamba. Ani Chanson Jolambadi, Lasantabi Semji Tobadena, Jolambi Lude, Amalani Pampa Pongaran, Luna Chipache. Ani Tenjo or Martin, Ani Lasantabi Semji Topti Zamba, Amalani Pampi Pumbote, Lasantabi Semji Topi Toji, Ani Ujirashi Lugon or Togore.
So the bodhicitta that we achieve when it's called the bodhicitta, which is purified through this higher aspiration or higher intention, once one generates that, then one's ordinary coarse contaminated aggregates, they're transformed into a body, so that you now have a body which has a mental nature, kind of mental nature, and not have the sort of coarse physical body that one previously had during earlier stages of the path.
Oh, 아니 다발자 좀그 샘제 되라. 나만 member하시가나 사디라된 테마니 나부 테마 다다죠. 나부 다다 마도비 이세나 바 member시. 전에 아니 가서래 도리잖아서 만나시세. 사디는 그 테마디 기 부기 내와다 되게 테마레스. 테마다 제와레스. 사제바토바이나 딘중 온주와 좀바인자 아니 나바 멤버십지선 거. 나고 테마다 되게 딘중 온주와 좀바인자. 딘중 온주와 좀바
라디
딘중 온주와 좀바 빵바나
나기 찌마단다
나부고 테마단다 차디. 是吧? 사 dimba menje ki nga bu chuma da jawa na shi che. 是吧? Da sa ge ba yan je de nga bu chuma dan cha wa din zeng wen ju wa zhuan ba yin zang.
So the metaphor which is given for the first 7 stages of the bodhisattva path, the bodhicitta in that condition is still in a sense has some residual contamination with it, which is analogous to the sort of fluid and whatever that one finds within a womb, like amniotic fluid or something like that. And then once one achieves the 8th bodhisattva bhumi, 8th bodhisattva stage, then that sort of contamination has been gotten rid of, because there then the sort of manifest forms of misapprehension of things as being real have been left behind.
Oh yeah, then do up on what I said, right? That didn't. 咱现在阶段就比说那个开发的了，让人家让人觉得呢，一旦你都干开吧，这什界就读不啊，确实这吧人，我这个速度，那现在提把全部什阶段就比说那么其他不行啊，是现那让他们把样子把所有强制度。 你打你那全当审计把来做归纳，是吧？提把全部审计的就比算那么其他不行啊。三界脱别来度，三界脱别来度提人设计人不见人生适当，并对我来说话人不见那对你让心机确定呢，家人安尼家啦，当时就当时被几天就看不见菜单样巴当，安尼帮啦。 我们几点几？俺你几点你都套吧？俺你天上见他们这几点吧？俺就搞钱为算那么太我人家让心确定你，我得几点你都给钱吧？是他得给钱吧？是吧？我第一天这位就给钱为算那太 심지도 중나 누가 보사는 초도 자신 개발도 봐봐 이노.
So then next is explained the merit, the special merit of inducing someone else, other beings, other persons to develop bodhicitta. That's expressed in verse 107. The question is posed, how much merit is there in inspiring others to develop bodhicitta of the great vehicle? And the answer is given in verse 107. Someone may build a precious reliquary as high as the world. It is said training others to generate the bodhicitta is more excellent. And then the commentary elaborates on that. It is said that the merit of one who builds a reliquary for the Buddha's relics, as vast as the, and here it says 3,000 great thousand world systems, you can translate that as 1 billion world systems, and as high as the world Akanishta. The translation here says beneath none, that's the Akanishta, the top of the world, made of the 7 precious substances such as gold and, here it says lapis lazuli, but that's properly beryl, the stone beryl, and adorned with every kind of ornament is surpassed, because it is more excellent by the merit of one who trains others to develop the bodhicitta. The example that's given for this is a man died and one of his friends cremated his body, while the other looked after all of his children. Just as this was best, that is taking care of the children rather than performing the cremation, the merit of causing others to generate the bodhicitta, intention, wish to achieve supreme awakening, so that the Buddha's lineage may not be broken, is superior to cremating the body of a Buddha.
Oh yeah, that's what you love to look like. You've been on it. That I'm sending you to be long. I could get I've been on it. Oh, tell a pendle lama, Loma Lani, Sisha. Can't she tape Mishaba, Teji Loma Shechao? That's how you somebody to turn that chashana. Only that do that take somebody to much gore. Tea somebody to much chades. Loma tella, Pamba derby, Loma tella, Loma lani, Loma tea, somebody to buy Lunga Chagores, tella, Pende Loma lani, Sisha. Yeah.
So next comes a topic which is the actual way in which one should train oneself in the conduct. Here is multiple subdivisions of it. First comes the behavior that one should engage in, physical and bodily and physical and verbal behavior that one ought to engage in to achieve the aims of others. This is given in verse 108. The question here is, questions aren't given in the Tibetan here. Okay. It's not given here, is it? In the Tibetan? Oh, sorry, yeah. How do bodhisattvas act to benefit sentient beings? Answer, they act according to those being dispositions. A spiritual, and the verse says, a lama or a guru who wishes to help must be attentive towards students. They are called students because of not knowing what will benefit, because they don't know what is beneficial to themselves. They're called students. A spiritual guide or guru or lama who wishes to help must physically and verbally attentive to students in keeping with their dispositions. They are called students because they do not know what actions are a benefit and need others' advice, someone else's advice.
Oh yeah. 로마라는 스시차 세자 강지 대변 미시바 대지 로마 세자고 군장 관계 치나 로마디 아니 자와 강다 강쳐와 제나 라라 편바디 미시바데 아니 현지 때는 현지 제수 장고와 이제 현지 제수 된 거와 티실 아니 로마시 군자 대리
So again, the text says it's because the students or disciples, you could translate that maybe as disciples, don't know what sort of conduct is beneficial to themselves. They require the instruction of others, and that's why they have this name of students or disciples.
야, 다디 뭐 현재 제 군제다. 다 선비 켜봐들으셔. 다 선비 이와 선비 켜봐들라. 이와 선비 켜봐라. 아여바나. 아여바나네. 네 무구비 가사라. 저위 차이 배당. 도저 지위人바당. 你们先去他们找的些有个，但那某个月看上来找了些白天打地的，那么就说的，朝阳准备老送完了。 member trooper member tar tuwe nyimon drasi si nyimon thante khasa me se o loma ne mugu nayang ane thi nyimon shaba la baba cha ko gre se loma ne de loma ne mugu nayang thi nyimon shaba la ba ko re se pena de pena chang jumbi sungwa la member trooper member ta pe de bare pena dengi wangi neba 내 휴학이 내바텔라 아니 내바테게 멤버라 아니 가서래 잘로 채와라 써와 리바라서 멤버 채와 이나나 멤버데 아니 내바텔라 투고 말이스 꼭 가이나 꼭 된지 쓴바 인사 맨나 된지 왕게 내바 멤버라 하바 초양 준비 수비 나바라 준비 수비 내바라 멤버 투바 많이 바타라세 준비 수비 내발라 멤버 추바 많이 받아라 초양 준비 송와라 다들이 가서 멤버 추바 받아 투에 누지 주지 니몬다 안에 semjante marungwa chaba 그 깨도 세디 semjan 코란 marungwa chaba de nyomong 그 아니 nyomong기 아니 왕도 송데 marungwa 류가 그 근저 믿음 받을 총화 인상 투에 semjan marungwa chaba 지게 깨도 세디 nyomong난 제베 가살라 초와 민배 도사 제수 주반은 추대를 나와 차오.
So next it explains the different features of the attitudes that someone should have, a bodhisattva should have, and here's multiple subdivisions of this that they should have by means of an example showing how they ought to should have compassion and love for persons that are harmful to them, not get angry at them in retaliation. And so the first one says that they should have love. Bodhisattva should have love for persons who are harmful to them and not retaliate against that. And so this is explained in verse 109. Even if students are recalcitrant or not obedient, one must endeavor to overcome their mental afflictions. Verse 109 then says, just as a physician is not upset with someone who rages while possessed by a demon, the sages or subduers see mental afflictions as the enemy, not the person who has them. Although a patient who is possessed by a demon rages at him, a physician will not be upset with this sick person that the demon, or here it says also like ghost, has taken hold of, or spirit has taken hold of them. Similarly, the sages see that because they make sentient beings unruly, the mental afflictions in a disciple's mind stream are at fault and not the person who has them. Those who wish to take care of disciples must act like this. So the example that's given to this is like a lion that attacks the one who throws the weapon, not the weapon that has been hurled at them.
Oh yeah, that's us.
Stop there for now.